Good evening and welcome to Pacific Western Region's webinar, Getting Your Social Media Ducks in a Row. This is the second session in a series that we are doing, trying to take a look at how congregations are pooling all of their social media work together and are reaching inside our churches and beyond, and I'm happy to have all of you here tonight. I want to first thank Lori Ragona and the Pacific Western Region for getting us all together and organizing our time. So before we get started, let me introduce myself to you. I'm the Director of Membership and Communications at Neighborhood Unitarian Universalist Church in Pasadena, California. We're a large church. We've got about 700 members in Southern California. We've got about 10 staff and 2 ministers and 1 community-affiliated minister. This was a part-time position about 8 years ago when I started, and it was a Director of Membership. Well, it was a membership coordinator position back then. And about 2 years ago, working with all of those members, we saw a real need to expand that into the communications world, which we have done for the last 2.5 years or so now. So my role here at Neighborhood Church is to oversee not only all of the welcoming and membership, but also all of the communications that we do here at the church, both on and offline. So social media is just one of the pieces that we do, but it is certainly a huge part of how we reach into our congregation. And before we get started, I have some opening words for us. This is a piece I have for you that was in the UU World a couple years ago called Shifting Gears from Mary Wellemeyer, and it really resonates with me. There's this feeling of being late, of rushing in from work and driving fresh from the traffic on the interstate. Now poised to join in a gathering already started, standing outside the door, shedding coat and hat and gloves, breathing carefully to slow the rushing. It seems I stand on an alien planet. When I open the door, a blast of calm smacks me hard. I enter the room on tiptoe. I feel the highway energy jangling through my body, already beginning to slide away. As I smile and sit down, this planet, this room, these friends, there is more to arriving than getting the body in place. So I light our chalice for our time tonight for rushing and getting here tonight and calming down and enjoying. Let me tell you a little bit about what we're going to be covering tonight. There are 3 main topics that we're going to review. The first is we're going to talk about best practices in social media. When we were together, some of us in October, we talked about the different channels that we might be using. And now tonight I want to talk about, once you're using those and the ones that are applicable to your congregation, what are some of the checks, the little check boxes you should be ticking off to ensure that you're doing the best work that you can, probably with limited resources and limited time. We're also going to be covering 2 other pieces. We're going to be talking about evaluation and analytics. So once you've started your social media, how can you tell that it's working? And I'll be taking you through a couple examples of that. And then we'll be concluding by looking at social media policies. So what type of policies should you have in place to protect yourself, protect the community that you've gathered online, and also protect the church? So in social media, there's a couple big pieces to keep in mind. You know, in real estate, they say that, real estate is all about location, location, location. Well, in the social media world, it's all about content, content, content. That's one of the most important things when you're thinking about best practices for your social media online presence, is what type of content you're going to be pulling together. It needs to be strategic, it needs to be well thought out, and there's a couple other pieces that I want to share with you that can help you make sure that you have the right content on your pages. The first is the content you're posting, depending on either any of your channels, whether it be Facebook, your website, Twitter, Tumblr, any of those, you need to make sure that it's relevant. One of the ways at Neighborhood Church that we make sure that we do that is we have larger communications campaigns that we do that often will tie into worship themes or sermon themes that we have going on. Most recently, for example, we had a huge immigration forum here on campus, and a lot of the work that we were doing was around immigration. So it was sort of thematically placed on that. So that's really important, is make sure it's relevant. People are so super busy. They're going to tune in to your channel. You want to make sure that it's worth their time. Speaking of time, I can't emphasize this one enough. You want to make sure that they're short. And for those of you who have been doing this for a while, you know what I mean. There's been a real evolution, if you will, on the type of content that we're posting. In the past, even just a year or two ago, a paragraph could really do it. That was fine. People were willing to slow down and read that. These days, what we're finding by taking a look at our posts and the engagement with those is that, they really can't be any more than 2 or 3 sentences max. That's sort of our guidelines for what we do on Facebook. And Twitter, of course, is the 140 characters, which I find to be a wonderful sort of editor to make sure that I'm keeping those short. Any longer than that, people are just going to glaze over. So make sure the content that you're creating is short. Aha, here's the other one, and this has definitely changed in the last year. Much of your content that you're posting needs to be visual. This has changed dramatically. It's changed dramatically because people will just glaze over text, and some of the channels, like Facebook, have changed their analytics and how they determine what your users see. And oftentimes, if there isn't a visual piece embedded in it, then it may not get out to your folks. So make sure that all of your posts have a visual component to it. And let me show you what I mean. I've got a couple of examples from some of our own feeds, so you can take a look at these. Now, knowing, of course, that when you're determining your visualness, you have to look at the different types of social media channels that you're using, because they all have sort of a little bit different tweak that you want to do for most effectiveness. This is an example, sort of 2 feeds from our Facebook page. This is actually from the pages that we follow, but I wanted to show you how some of the groups are embedding images. So you go ahead and just upload those images along with your post, and you can see yourself, I'm sure, that your eyes are automatically drawn to the ones that have images. If you look over to the right at the top, there are 2 pieces that don't have images, and those are going to get lost in the fray. So we very rarely will post anything on Facebook without some sort of image that's on there. Here is an example on Twitter. Again, this is part of our feed, so you can see the type of things that we're doing. And yes, we're following George Takei because he's just very entertaining. Twitter has changed recently where, in the last little bit, where you can create something called Twitter cards. On Twitter, you can go ahead and upload an image that's there. And that's great. If you look at the George Takei one, you can see that he's got a Tumblr piece that's connected to that. You can see that little link, the different color that's down there. But you can also create what they call Twitter cards, where you're actually making sure that the image is embedded in your post, again, so that it doesn't get lost. That's a really cool and great thing to do. I would highly recommend it. If you want to know how to do that, Twitter's got a great tutorial. So if you're on Twitter and you're using that, then just go ahead and click on there and search for Twitter cards, and it will walk you through how to do that. Here's another way of ensuring that you have a visual presence as well. The great thing about Google Plus is that Google Plus will integrate with YouTube quite seamlessly, and I highly recommend it. We are not that active on Google+, except that I make sure that I'm cross-promoting and that all of my different feeds are feeding into each other. So if you look at this particular page, you'll see that we have some Facebook images, the one in the middle that's come up because that's feeding into, I've set it up so that it's feeding into our Google Plus page. And then on the right-hand side, there's a video that's there. Do you see that video? That's being fed in from YouTube. So I highly recommend, if you do only a few different social media channels, if that's something that your congregation is just beginning to do, then go ahead and make sure you sign up for a Google Plus account and link things on there. The other side note is that really helps you move up on the Google searches, and you really want that for your congregation. And if you want to talk more about that later, I'm happy to do that. Flickr is another channel that we're on. Flickr is basically an online photo album. The thing about Flickr is that it is mostly, well, it is actually all photography based. So these are your highest quality images. These are not the images that you just happen to click with your iPhone, though you can, but Flickr really demands higher quality images, mostly professional folks or enthusiasts that are doing that. So for us, we put with permission, all of our professional photographers on there. So whether it's a photo shoot that was of our campus, you can see there on the right-hand side, that's our chapel off to the right there, which is a smaller venue that we have in addition to our sanctuary. And then we also have professional photographers that do weddings, right? Lots of weddings. And so we always ask them for pictures of that. Because a lot of traffic that we get at our church are weddings. We get a ton of weddings, and I'm sure a lot of you do as well. So being able to visually curate those images helps a lot of couples as they're planning their wedding. This is another channel that we're on and another way of making sure that you have a visual presence. This is Pinterest. This is one that I think churches that were a little slower getting onto, congregations are just beginning to do that. There are some congregations like the one in Atlanta that are doing amazing work on Pinterest. The other thing to think about, again, it's just a visual curation of your congregation, of your community. On ours, what we've done here is we've organized our Pinterest site by our principles, as well as some other different pieces, you know, a general Unitarian Universalism one, so for folks who are checking us out. We have a YRE page. A lot of times some of our YRE youth like to create their own events and stick them on there. And again, we also have weddings and events. The important thing about images on Pinterest is that they are connected images. So people who are part of Pinterest will look at your site and they'll pin, like a bulletin board, they'll pin the pieces onto their bulletin board, and then your name starts getting out there, people get to know about you. It's a great way of reaching easily out into sort of the larger world. The other visual site that we use is Instagram. Instagram is based on smartphones. It's a way of very quickly sharing images and sharing them in a different way. For Instagram, the images are about shared experience. So you post an image and then people can like it, they can make comments, and it's almost like a smaller Facebook page. That's only images that are on there for the most part. So we make sure that we get a lot of our visual pieces out there as another way of providing content to our larger online community. You can see from a content point of view, if you had a very strategic campaign of content, let's say, for example, the immigration one that we did last week, through all these different channels, you could be posting similar images, similar messaging, and tying them all together and having a really seamless and strategic communications campaign. The other piece that I do a lot of is humor. I like humor on our pages, and if you consider doing this, you have to be careful about what you're posting. I would recommend starting slowly and watching the engagement from your community to see if it's really resonating with them. That will help you get a sense of your community's brand or identity. Are they responding well to it? Are they sharing it? You know, all of those pieces as well. So our community responds very well to humor, and thank goodness. And they tend to get shared on Facebook pages more than our other things too. So here's one of the ones that we did last year, and this one too. I'm sure many of us can relate to this as well. So people like that a lot. Also talking about best practices for your social media, getting your social media ducks in a row. The other thing to begin thinking about is the frequency. Oh my goodness, how often do I have to do this? And there is some answers, some not. The important thing is that you're consistent. When people like your page or choose to follow you, they're expecting you to be rather consistent with what you're posting. They want to be engaged with that. But there's a fine line because you don't want to inundate as well. You know what I mean? So if you go and do a search online and search for the best and worst times to post, you will get 1,001 answers. And here's an example of one of the infographics that's out there. When I first started managing a social media, I had all these taped up by my computer, and I tried really hard to adhere to it. But what I learned, and we'll talk about this in a few slides, is I can really look at our own followers, figure out when they're online and what works best for them. So on Facebook, this particular piece tells us that the worst time is 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. Okay, that makes good sense. Not a lot of people are on at that point. But they also, if you look at the one where it says best on the right-hand side, they're kind of saying, between 8 a.m. and 2 p.m. isn't that great. That it really hasn't been our experience with our social media followers. So take a look. Do what's best for your particular congregation and the folks that are following you on all of these. I can give you an example, though, of what we do. For us, we post about twice a day on Facebook, no more, because I don't want to inundate people. We try to tweet once a day. We can do more. I just sometimes can't get around to it. The half-life of a tweet, of that piece that you put on there in Twitter, it's called a tweet. The half-life is about 18 minutes. So for those of you that are on Twitter, you know that you can see that scrolling, that it goes really super fast. For those of you that are just dipping your toes into that pond, you'll see that things don't stick around an awful lot. So you can tweet a lot more on there, and people don't get annoyed with that. But Facebook, I definitely only do twice a day. And as I said before, we try and connect them all so they're feeding into each other. And I can be happy to talk to you offline about that if you want some tools to do that. We've also been doing more video these days, and I will only do a video once a week. I don't want to inundate people with that. And the most important thing to think about when you're thinking about your consistency and your frequency of that content is don't post if you have nothing to share. That's super important. People will see right through that. So don't do it if you don't have anything to share. A lot of the work that I do is finding things to share, is making sure I get all the information out there, more than just the, hey, there's a choir rehearsal. We don't do that kind of posting, but we try to do things that are relevant and important for people. So don't do it if you don't have it. Take the day off. That's totally fine. The other piece, when you're thinking about the best practices for your social media communications campaign, is to create content that is engaging, and for you yourself to also be engaging, for your congregation to be engaging online. And let me tell you what I mean about that. So when I'm looking at taking care of all of our social media pieces, here's what I try to pay attention to. The first is I want to make sure that I am responsive. Want to make sure that from the church's voice that I'm responding to users, to the mentions that we have on there. I'm responding to questions and to commentary. So I'm always keeping an eye on what's happening on those pages, Facebook and Twitter and all of those, and responding to those. We had a longtime member, an elderly member, pass away, unfortunately, earlier this week. And on Monday, and later on Monday afternoon, when I looked at our Facebook page, I saw that her daughter had posted a lovely piece about how much her mom loved our church. So I was able to make a little comment and, you know, send our condolences her way. And that means a lot to people as well. The other reason why you are being responsive, you're paying attention, is you're looking at all that different feedback to help you fine-tune your posting times, you know? So when are people responding more? What works the best? You're also going to be paying attention to your voice and to your content as well. Maybe that humor post that you didn't quite hit the mark, which I've certainly had happen, and people tell you about it, and that's terrific because it gives me really good feedback of what not to do next time. I try to be very responsive online. Now, the other thing is, you know, be human. It's okay to be funny and kind and respectful and all of those things that we are, but you also need to make sure that you assume all of the interactions that you're doing, all of your posting, every comment is public. And it will be public forever and ever and ever. So be thoughtful and mindful with what you're posting and how you're commenting. The other piece that we're careful about when we are looking to engage our online audience is that we are very inclusive. We're not exclusionary. And what I mean by that is don't be too internal. You're not going to attract a larger audience outside of your walls, of your physical congregation, if you're only posting things like, don't forget about choir practice on Thursday. That's great just for that group. That's great just for your congregation. But looking at our Facebook page, there's a ton of people who like our page, who are not members of our church, who don't live in Pasadena, who don't live in California. They're all over the place. And for me, that's one of the good evaluations of success. It means I'm engaging beyond our walls. Our next webinar in December is going to be talking about outreach and how to do that a little bit more. So a lot of it is don't be too internal with that. So pay attention to what you're posting. Again, we're talking all about best practices and content, content, content. The other piece is monitor your site, like I was saying before, and listen. Pay attention to other sites. What are some of the congregations in your area? What are some other groups? What are they doing? You know, pay attention. Be a really good listener and see how you can use that, A, to garner more content because you're looking for good content to share with your congregation and your followers. And also just to be mindful of what's happening out there. And there are some great tools to do that, which I promise I will show you momentarily. And the other piece about engagement is just keep it simple. Just only use the social media channels that serve your population. We use Pinterest, as I said before, because we have and Flickr, because we have a large wedding population. We do a ton of weddings. We have a large campus that is able to accommodate that. We're using Tumblr more and more, which tends to be, it's a microblogging site that tends to have sort of the 20-something or so followers. We have a growing demographic and population. So every site that we're on, I'm really strategic about why we're doing it. I'm not just doing it because I'm supposed to or because someone said, hey, aren't you cool? Don't you have a Tumblr site? I'm only going to do it and put the time into it if I know that it's going to serve a population either inside or outside of our congregation. And then lastly, the other rule of engagement for us is cross-promote. You can think of this in two ways. One is that you're taking one particular content, one particular message, and sharing it across the different channels like we talked about against the different social media platforms. The other piece, and this ends up being good social media karma, if you will, is if you have an event, like say the immigration one as well, as I was talking about before, and we had a number of community partners, make sure that you mention them, and actually you can hashtag them in a Twitter feed, or make sure you comment on the Facebook so it shows up on their Facebook feed. You know, let the world know how cool they are and what they're doing for you, and then most likely they'll do the same for you. So if you have 500 people following your Facebook page, and you've mentioned a community group directly on there, and it shows up on their feed, then they might have 1,000 people, and all of a sudden you've cross-promoted and gone further out. The other piece is that you can, if you have an event that you think someone might be interested in, you can ask them to go ahead and retweet it or post it on their Facebook page, and they often will. People are really great about that, and it's a terrific way of cross-promoting. The days of taking out the ads in the newspapers really aren't there very much. So it's good social media karma, so take a look at doing that. Okay, the last piece I want to talk to you about best practices is one of the things you want to make sure that you're doing is looking at your branding and your voice that you're using online. I know that sounds very corporate, and sometimes some of our folks go, oh my gosh, branding, isn't that where you pay an overpaid consultant to come in and do new logos and things for you? That isn't necessarily true for our work and for what we do as spiritual communities. For us, branding is really about building trust and your congregation's expectations. So when they go online, when they see a tweet from you, when they see a Facebook post from you, what can they expect? And here's some of the things that you can think about providing for them that is consistent and that brands you as you, that makes you unique. One is your logo, which in our parlance, right, is a chalice. So do you have a chalice that's unique to you? Do you have a chalice that you're using that perhaps is the UUA's and you're going to be consistent with that? Be consistent and using that same chalice in all of your different pieces. So when people see that one pop up, they'll say, aha, that's the congregation in Spokane. Aha, that's Pasadena, California. You know, do that so you've got some branding of your congregation. The other piece that's important is really looking at fonts and colors. For us, we went through a rebranding, I guess last summer or so, and it really took about a year to get into effect, where we're in a historic part of Pasadena, California. Yes, right around the corner from where the Rose Parade goes. And we have a over 100-year-old craftsman home that our church offices are in. And for Pasadena, California, that green and green craftsman architecture is really popular. So we had a very muted color palette that was greens and grays and browns, and also a very elaborate craftsman font as well. And what we decided is that fonts and colors really communicate to people beyond your walls some stuff about you. That said that we were historic, that said that we were a little bit older, that said that we weren't, that we were more conservative. And all those things are certainly true about the area that we're in, but we took a look at our congregation to see who was here, and we realized that we're younger than that, we're a lot more fun, and we wanted to bring a vibrancy to it. So we went through a whole change with a new chalice, new fonts and colors that really helped bump that up as well. So I encourage you to take a look at that. And if you can't, do a whole big new branding campaign for your church, certainly be consistent in building your social media channels so that they have that. Branding is also about the voice that you use online. When we were together in October, some of us, we talked about this a little bit, about the different voices that different social media platforms will tolerate, if you will. Facebook is a little more formal, whereas Twitter can be a little, I don't know, it can be a little bit younger, a little bit hipper. It can be a little cheeky, if you will. The Twitter audience will tolerate that and like that and sort of expect that, whereas that doesn't read very well on Facebook. So take a look at the different platforms that you're using and consider your voice. The other piece about voice is that we always use a third-person voice for the church because even though it's me, Kim Hayden, sitting at my desk in Pasadena, California, doing all of that social media stuff, I'm doing it for the church. So I'm never using things like I or me. I'll use we because that's I'm a little more third person as well. And this was a challenge for us because when I inherited the larval stage of social media that we had a number of years ago, everybody on our staff had administrative access to our social media. So everybody was able to post. Everybody was willing to do that. And what was happening is that people were overlapping each other. Different people had different voices and different tones. So I was able to rein that in a little bit, and that was important. So we took care of some of that as well. And I also created some guidelines for our staff, or if they do want to create a post, to send it to me with the type of voice that sort of works for our particular online community. The other piece that you can use for branding is there might be other images that you use on your campus. And for us, we use some of our, we got some bushes and some trees and things like that. I'm very consistent about that. That really speaks to it. So I'll show you a picture of that as well. And I love that Lori just asked the question because I want to fold it into that. Lori is asking about minister posts. How do they designate who they are? Our ministers don't post. I will post for them, but I don't get something, because if we do third person, I don't get a minister saying, hey, come out to, I'm going to be at the Immigration Forum next week, join me. We just do third person with that. I'll say Reverend Jim Nelson will be attending, that kind of piece instead. When they do all of their not personal, but their individual pieces, Lori, on a blog that we do instead. That's on our Facebook page. That's on our website that feeds into Facebook, feeds into Twitter, and for those, I'm able to actually go ahead and author it so they know it's from those ministers that are doing that. But kind of a funny side story about this is I had to teach our senior minister to stop liking his own posts. They weren't his posts, but if I said something online, I'm just making this up, like, wasn't that a great service today? I don't post that, but something like that. Then he would go ahead and go on as Neighborhood Church and like it. You can't do that. It's like liking yourself and patting yourself on the back. The other thing that he was doing, and it was great because he was really enjoying doing some of those Facebook posts, is he started taking pictures of the campus early in a Sunday morning and posting them, which was great. But the problem is that it would often overlap pieces that I already had. So we just make sure that when they do things from them, that we make sure that they're assigned to them. People know that it's them, and I think that that's really important to do. So let me show you what I mean about branding. So let me show you a couple different pieces as well with that. This is an example of our website. Just a screenshot I took yesterday. And I want to show you a couple different things that are on there. You can see our chalice. That's the chalice that we actually have on campus. It's part of a labyrinth, a mosaic labyrinth that we have that is unique to us, that we had an artist do a rendering. So we always use that particular chalice. The color's a little bit off here, but we're using a green colors. It's a little more limey than what it's showing up on the monitor here for me. That's there. So I'm using similar colors. I'm using similar imagery as well with the chalice. And then let me also show you, this is our Facebook page, I think yesterday or earlier this week as well. There again is the same chalice. And then that image of trees, that's the red bud that we have outside our minister's office that we use pretty consistently as well. So I'm using some similar images as well to then do that branding. Okay. All right, so now you're doing all this, and isn't that great? How do you know if it's working? What can you do to pay attention to this? Now, social media analytics is just a way of gathering data from social media websites and blogs to help you make decisions about what you're doing. And it changes day to day, and that's the really cool thing about this. It's really a lot more than just how many people are liking your page, though that's a great way of looking at it too, but it's more than that for sure. So I have to sort of out myself and let you know that yes, I was the person at university that really likes statistics, so I get a little stuck in this sometimes, but I want to show you some of the basic ways that you can sort of, again, dip your toe into social media analytics. When you're thinking about measuring your data, the important thing, obviously, is to think about what you want to measure. For us, there are 3 things that we measure and that I would recommend to everyone as well. You want to measure engagement. You want to measure traffic coming to your sites and how it's coming to your sites, and also trends. What's happening with your trends. Again, to use that immigration one as an example, we found some trends that we had a lot of non-church members, off-campus folks, if you will, like our Facebook page as a reaction to that month's campaign that we were doing. So that was certainly a trend, and that was an easier one to figure out. But look at the trends. What's happening with your congregation? What's happening with your larger community as well? That you might want to track, and how it is impacting your social media sites. What I want to do is take you through some examples of the analytic tools that are already at your fingertips. You don't need to pay a company to do this. It doesn't have to be as complicated. If you do a search for social media analytics, it gets really crazy. You don't need to do any of that. Just take a look at what you already have there. And I want to show you some of the examples from Facebook first, because they're really user-friendly. There's a whole lot of stuff on there, and it's a good way to start. So I'm going to turn the next slide. I apologize if you need to grab your glasses. I need to grab mine. There is a whole lot of information that's on these. So let me walk you through some of it. And what I'm basically going to do is just, if you and I were sitting together looking at a computer, I'd be clicking through the tabs and showing you the opportunities that are on there. So for Facebook, on the top of your Facebook page, as an administrator, not as your general public, but there will be a section that's called Insights. So if you see the one on the right at the top, it says Page. That's just your page. Settings way on the right is just the different pieces, passwords and things like that you've got set up as well, perhaps, and who sees what and your privacy. But if you click on Insights, then you're going to get this sub-menu that comes up underneath that says Overview, and I've clicked on the first Overview for you. This is the one that I tend to look at the most. It's the one that, very quick and dirty, as I'm going through the day, I can take a look at that. It shows you that you're looking at data from just this week from this past Monday as well. It shows me how many people have liked our page. It shows me if I'm up or down from last week. We had 3 new people that liked it. Look on the left-hand side there last week, and you can see that little bump up. See those 2 little graphs that are there? The dark blue on the left-hand side is this week. The gray one is last week. And if you're paying attention to your posts, you can really look at, so what happened on the 30th? What happened on the 29th that peaked that as well? I can tell you that some of it was our immigration stuff that we were doing. On the 31st, we had some great video pieces from one of our local congresswomen. So, trying to figure out what it is that they liked about that as well. The next middle column that's there is a post reach, so it lets you know how many people are you reaching and why, again, because you're wanting to pay attention to that. You can see that we had a big reach from over 2,000 people that's there. And again, part of it was that immigration piece as well. The other piece that we were experiencing is we had also first did some paid advertisements, and I'll show you that a little bit later, and so that bumped our numbers up a little bit as well. On the right-hand side, there's engagement. So looking at all the posts that I did for the week, I had 79 people like it. I had 6 people make comments. I had 13 people share comments. And then I had 165 people actually do individual clicks on posts. So that gives me an idea of what's on there. A little further down on this page, you'll see that we've got our 5 most recent posts at the time. And just running through that briefly, I can tell you, look at the one that was the biggest. And that was the one on October 31st. And that was the piece that we did about the congresswoman that was going to be here for the immigration forum. That reached 200 people organically. So that was just, 200 individuals like that or shared that or commented on that. So that was terrific. And the one below that also with Grady Goddard was a video that we did with her encouraging our congregation to come to a meeting to vote for a new senior minister. We have a senior minister candidate that's here this upcoming week. So video is being very successful for us. Okay, let me show you then when I'm doing this, what's the next thing we do. So look back up again at that submenu where it says overview. It's got the dark blue line underneath it. I'm going to skip over likes because that doesn't really tell me anything. X amount of people liked it. Well, that's great, but I'm not that concerned about that. I'm going to take a look at reach. How many people did I reach in this same time period? So here I've clicked on it there. And there are a couple of different pieces that are there. What's great is that the top one that's sort of grayed out looks at our daily data as it goes through a couple of different months. So you can get an idea of what's happening, and you can change the start and end time on that if you wanted to. I can also look at post reach and seeing who I'm reaching with those. There's 2 reasons I want you to look at that one. One is that most of our posts are organic. That means it's just people that like our page, that are seeing it. If they're commenting on it or sharing it, then it's friends of those friends that are seeing it. You can see there was a huge high. Do you see on the 19th, or I think the 20th, October 20th, there's a huge peak. That was the announcement of our senior minister candidate. That got a lot of traffic online. So, and that was expected. If I didn't know what that was, I'd go, what the heck happened on the 20th? And I would go back and take a look at that. The other thing to look at on that particular graph, see the little dark mustard color? That's a paid advertisement that we did. So you can pay to boost certain posts. We paid $5 a day to reach a couple thousand people a day to get the word out about our immigration forum, because that was an external thing that we were doing. I wouldn't do that for internal pieces. That just wouldn't make sense, because you want to reach beyond. It's really groovy. Again, I'm happy to talk to you another time about that, because you can really set the demographics of who you want to do with that. And I think we'll certainly be covering that in our December time together in the 3rd part of our webinar series. And then, let's see, the last one, the likes, comments, and shares. Again, that's looking at how many people are liking your posts. That's that kind of purpley color. How many people are sharing it. There's your darker red. You can see it's peaking about the same day. And then how many people are commenting on it. So for me, I really view engagement as successful when I'm seeing a real peak in comments and shares, because for me, my philosophy of social media is that it's a wonderful tool to get people engaged with each other, to get comments as well. If I can post something online and people start talking about it, whether with the church and making comments or with each other, then that is terrific. Then it's people that are really engaging online together, and that's what I want to see. Okay, so going again back up to that page, the top, excuse me, the submenu that's got reach and it's got visits and things like that. I'm going to then scroll over to posts. So you'll see the next one. Visits I'm not as interested in, but I'm going to go to look at posts, and let me show you. Oh no, this is visits. So this is the visits one. Visits then is telling me how people are getting to our Facebook page and also how they are interacting with it. So the top one shows me that they're mostly looking at our timeline. You know, that's the scroll of content. They're looking at our notes. They're also clicking on the information tab. This looks much clearer. All these colors are very similar, but when you go online, it looks a little bit better. The info tab is super interesting to me because I'm looking at then how people are checking us out before they come on campus. So they're saying, well, who are these people? What's happening? When is their service? You know, that kind of stuff, and I really, really like that. We get very few reviews, but they do happen. So that's what the page and tab visits tells you. And then the bottom one, the external refers, tells me then how people are coming to the church. So the dark blue are people that are doing a Google. That has jumped up wonderfully for us since we started doing Google+, which I was mentioning before. Some folks are coming to us from our website that's there. We get people that come from wedding sites and different pieces. So another great piece to take a look at. And on this page as well, you can go in as deep as you want to with this, but you can see that on the right-hand side, you see where it says benchmark? You can actually look at each of those individually, and you can compare it over time. So it's kind of like a rabbit's hole. You have to be careful not to fall in too much. But think about what you're trying to measure and what you're hoping to gain with that. Okay, so now I'm going to go over to the sub-menu that says posts, like I promised I would do. Okay, this one tells me when our fans, when the people liking our page are online. So see where it says posts with that dark blue line? Then down below there's a sub menu now. It says when your fans are online. For this particular week, at any given bit, we had 626, 610 people, 600 and something folks that were on Facebook, which is pretty typical. We've got almost 800 likes, so some people were not, but that's pretty consistent for us. If you were to look at that strategically, you could say, hey, more folks are on Sunday, so I'm going to make sure I post more on Sunday. More folks are on Wednesdays, I'm going to post more on Wednesdays. For us, it's pretty flat. There's not huge jumps. But take a look at yours if you have a Facebook page, if you're setting that up. The other piece that's then very specific to my audience is when are they online? And this is this whale shape that's right here. And this is where I was saying to you before that when you should post and the frequency you should post is really individual to you and to your congregation. My folks are on all the time. Do you see that? So starting from about, 8 all the way up until 9 p.m., folks are really, really online. There's a slight dip around the dinner hour. So it doesn't matter too terribly for us because they tend to be on that as well. Okay, now I'm going to that sub menu. Do you see that sub menu that's going there? I'm going to go ahead and click on that. Okay, these are post types then. This is the one I like to look to see what am I doing that people are really responding to. And for this week, can you see which one it is? It was video. And that's because we had two important videos. We had our board of trustees talking about our new senior minister candidate. We had 466 folks that we reached with that. 114 did unique clicks in that post, which is just terrific. So you can sort of take a look and see what people are doing and how they're responding to it. So I like looking at that because it lets me know what I'm doing and what's working. I'm going to keep doing video because that's working. And I just do that on my iPhone. Nothing fancy, right? Keep it simple. Don't worry about doing anything fancy. Now I'm going to click over on that sub-menu that says People. Let me show you this. This is great. This tells you your demographics. We're still just doing Facebook. This is all stuff that's just on Facebook for you. And I hope you're not feeling overwhelmed. I wanted to show you what was possible that you could go through. You can, dip your toe in a little bit here and there, or if you already know it and you're comfortable with it, then you can see how you can manipulate your online presence to change these a little bit. So these are the people that like our page. We can see that 64% of our folks are women, and that's compared to 46% of people on all of Facebook. So that's not surprising for a church. I think that's pretty typical of that. And then the thing that I always like to check, if you look down below, that shows you who in the world is following you. So I think that that's really neat. On the right-hand side, it's by country, and then the middle column is by city. That's pretty common for us, but it helps us see the demographics of who we're reaching and how far out. We've got 7 people in Chicago, so that's pretty neat, though our minister before this is now the head of Meadville, so that's probably why that's there as well. But, we've got a couple people in Italy. We've got 2 people in Brazil. I mean, go figure. I don't know if those are family members or what's happening. Then if I click over the submenu, it says up at the top, your fans. If I can click on people reached, I like that one a lot. Let me show you this particular one. Okay. This then is the posts that we've done. Who have we reached with that? Who has engaged with it? And this was a very unusual week. This is not, and I can tell you why I think that is. There's a real hump. The bigger hump that you see is the 25 to 34-year-old demographic. That's fairly unusual for a lot of our congregations. For us, we tend to either have a bigger hump of people that are engaged, and then the 35 to 44 or the 45 to 54 category. So, and my theory on this is because we did a lot more video. I think a lot of people were more comfortable using the video, perhaps. A lot of younger people were more comfortable doing that. And also because we paid to boost that advertisement for the immigration form that I mentioned to you. So we were reaching a broader audience beyond our congregation that perhaps wasn't necessarily representative of our congregation and who's online. And if you look down, do you see this particular week we reached over 7,000 people. That's because we paid to boost that post. So if you got something important going on, you want to reach beyond the walls of your church, do that. And we'll talk about that in December. This is also really great when you're looking at your fans, the one that we looked at before. For people in your congregation that say, you know what, I just don't think it's worth your time to be doing all the social media stuff because our older folks aren't using it. And you can look on it and say that isn't true because you can really take a look at once you've gotten them to like your page, how that breaks down. That is really not true. Our heaviest users, like I said, are 35 to 54. And we've got a ton of people in the 65 plus. So that's sort of an old adage that people used to have about social media that really doesn't work anymore. Okay, and then this is one more piece, the sub menu. This is about people who have liked, commented, or shared your posts and engaged with it. So even though we reached that younger, that 25 to 35-year-old more, we reached them more, then it was more of our typical audience of 35 to 44 that really then commented and shared with it and did all of that. Again, not surprising because of our senior minister announcement that we made. Okay, whew, that's a lot of Facebook stuff, isn't it? But really good and really exciting. And I did give you a disclosure that I was a statistics nerd. I couldn't help it, so I'm sorry. I hope your ears aren't bleeding. Let me show you then some other pieces besides Facebook that you can use for statistics. YouTube has a great one as well. If you're posting videos on YouTube, hey, look, there's our chalice, right? See? There's some branding that's there as well. You can see how many people have viewed some of your pieces that are online, how many minutes they've watched, and all of that. We don't tend to advertise our YouTube channel very much, so we don't really have subscribers. I'm not as consistent with that. I instead will embed those video pieces in Facebook and other things. But you can see, looking down, that our senior minister candidate had 336 views, which is great. And then it goes down from there, but that was important to me to really evaluate that that was a good way of reaching our congregation with that. This is an example of a site that I really, really like called Hootsuite. Hoot like an owl hoots, and suite like what I want to get upgraded to when I go to a hotel, Hootsuite. And there's a couple of things I really like about this. If you look over sort of the top left where it says Neighborhood UU, oh look, there's a chalice, the same chalice, Neighborhood UU Twitter, I can set up this particular site to show me lots of different things. So rather than running around like a chicken with my head cut off, I can go through and say, hey, Hootsuite, show me every time someone mentions something on Twitter about our church, show me all of our messages so I know who I need to respond to. So that is, again, being responsive. I can see all of my tweets that I've done, and then I can also see my home feed, which is on the far right. So it's a great way of running your eyes over it, you know what I mean, in a really easy way to do. So I highly recommend Hootsuite. The other thing Hootsuite does is, if you look again, top left, it says Neighborhood UU. Now it says UUism. I've also then tagged it and said, hey, Hootsuite, show me on Twitter, and you can do it for Facebook and other pieces, show me anytime anyone mentions something about Unitarian Universalist or Unitarian Universalism, you can set up those keywords. So that's what's on the right-hand side that's there. I do that because, again, I'm always looking for content. I want to keep my finger on the pulse. I want to see what's happening. I want to see what, our sister congregations are doing out there. So I keep an eye on that as well. Another great way of streamlining your work and not having to visit too many things at once. The other reason I really like Hootsuite, number 3, is because, and this is going to be the most important, is you can schedule all of your posts. Hallelujah. This means that Kim Hayden does not work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Feels like it sometime, and I know a lot of you can relate to that. But what I do is I will schedule usually like Friday through Monday, because I'm too busy with services and things like that, to really be making sure I'm going on. I can go on and schedule all of them all of those days. So I can make sure I've got 2 Facebook posts, I've got a Twitter tweet going out, and things like that. So if you look at this that I have for you, that little, that black bar on the left-hand side, it's the little airplane. That's the little scheduler thing. And you can see I'm in the process right there of putting in a piece about our candidate who's preaching this Sunday. I'm letting our folks know about town hall meetings afterwards, and of course, I'm going to go ahead and add a picture to that. And then behind that in the box are all the ones that they've already scheduled. So you can do pictures, you can do links, you can do all of that on there, and I highly recommend it, especially if you're a volunteer, having to do this in your congregation, if you're the solo person, if you're the minister working in a smaller church and you want to have a big online presence, but don't have all of the time, you could literally sit down once a week for half an hour and get this whole thing out. So it's a free service, and I think they should send me an endorsement check now. All right. Okay. The last piece I want to touch on very briefly for you in talking about getting all of our social media ducks in a row is to talk a little bit about social media policies. This is really important to do so that you can set expectations of that communication, that compatibility, that engagement for folks that are part of your online community, your online presence. And, a lot of it is really common sense, but as with anything, it's important to be really transparent. And I like to think that social media policies are very much like the golden rule, right? So some of you have probably seen this before, this THINK acronym. This is up in a lot of classrooms these days. And I think, as spiritual communities, I think that really fits for us. Is it true? Is it helpful, inspiring, necessary, and kind? So think before you speak is what they're teaching our kids to do these days. And I think that is just really terrific. For our social media policies here at Neighborhood Church, we have sort of two different policies that we work with. One are our internal policies that we work with our other staff members, our lay leaders, our volunteers. And again, this is widely disseminated, widely shared with everybody, and that's super important. But the piece that we first ask in our policy is that anything you're doing online needs to be respectful. We're a spiritual community. That goes without saying. I think that's super important, that internally you're representing the church, you're not representing an individual, and you're mindful of our first principle. And since I do most of the posting, that is not as much of an issue because I'm not managing a large group of people that are posting, but I'm very clear about that on our internal policies, and you might think about that depending on how many people have admin access to different sites. The other piece, and we sort of touched upon this before about who is posting, is that be transparent. Let them know who you are. This also gets back to the piece we talked about, be human. Let them know who you are. Let them know who is posting. On all of our media sites, we have a piece that says, Neighborhood Unitarian Universalist Church in Pasadena, California. We make sure people know who our ministers are. I let them know who's moderating the site, so I'm moderating, and I've got links to all, email addresses for all of them. So be really transparent with what you're doing online, and that, right, transparency works well for all of our various communities. The other piece is that you need to be truthful. All the posts that are on there reflect or appear to reflect official stances and policies of the church. So stay away from opinions. You need to be factful and truthful, just the facts, ma'am, that kind of piece. So internally, this is how I coach our staff and our lay leaders when we're looking at social media. The other piece is that obviously all of those posts have to be legal. So you need to make sure that you've got the appropriate attribution for all the words, the pictures, the videos, music, and make sure that they follow all of the copyright rules. Music's a really tricky one. We don't post any music. I know a lot of you probably do the same. It's always a big piece that's out there. But you have to be careful with those, with copyright issues with those. We also, again, making sure we all maintain our, correct nonprofit status. We don't then also post any political candidate endorsements. We have Facebook groups where I clearly state in the usage that these are individuals representing their own opinion and not those of the church. They can do that all they want. That's fine, but not on our official pieces that are on there. The other internal social media policy that we make sure that we employ is one of safety. Make sure that everything you're doing is safe. So we don't post any pictures of children without a parental waiver on file. So when all of our kids register for YRE, we make sure that they go ahead and have a photo permission on, they give us photo permission or else we won't use it. We never tag individuals. That's really, really important. We also don't post any home addresses. So just be safe with what is going on there. Externally, so thinking about the external usage policy, on all of our sites, we've got something that's pretty much the same, but we make sure that our usage policies are welcoming. So we're letting people know that anybody can contribute to the conversations, anybody can share content as long as it's directly related to Neighborhood Church and to Unitarian Universalism, whether it's posts, comments, photos, or other content expected to be relevant and respectful. So we're setting some content parameters that are there. We also let folks know that we will delete posts or comments that we deem inappropriate, and this is what we mean by inappropriate. And I can send any of these to you. I can send you a copy. I'm going to send it actually tomorrow, I think, copies of our policies. If it's irrelevant, hateful, malicious, uncivil, disrespectful, financial solicitations, any of those pieces that are really not appropriate as part of a spiritual community. And we're also careful, any post, can't violate the terms or use code of conduct or other policies within that social media channel like Facebook. So they've got very clear policies as well. So we try to marry those two together. So as you're looking at getting your social media ducks in a row, creating policies are really important because they help set expectations for how people will engage with each other and engage with you online. I can tell you now, I have never deleted a post. I just haven't. I haven't had to. We have had a couple goofy things happen, and the community itself took care of it. So, but I want to make sure that if I do have to delete something, and talking to our ministers, that it's expected because of our policy that I've been transparent, and I have shared that as well. So, my friends, that takes us to the end of talking about social media and getting it all set up for yourself. A couple different things. I want to take a couple questions. So if you have a question that you would like to ask, please make sure to put that over in the chat box, and I will make sure to read those and get those to you. And I also want to remind you that we'll also be sending out a survey, so it's super helpful if you have any thoughts or comments that we can go ahead and address when the link that Lori sends out on the survey. So if you have any questions, let me know now. I'll wait a couple minutes, seconds. You might all be asleep. I know it. It's late for some of you. All right. If there aren't any other questions, wait, I have one above from Lonnie. Oh, thank you, Lonnie. Let's see. Here is the, let's see, do you ever capitalize on the fact that the Big Bang Theory is set in Pasadena? There are a lot of viewers in the younger demographic. I'm wondering about commenting on the fan pages for Big Bang Theory. That is super interesting, or other sort of locations and related to popular media. No, I haven't thought about that at all. I think that a lot of our congregation, big, no surprise here, works in the entertainment industry, and so I think we're kind of over it. The same thing, the Rose Parade is here, and we're big with that. No, so I haven't thought about that. We get a ton of Caltech people as well, so that's a good idea. Talk about cross-promoting. Maybe I'll get some of those fan base. So thank you, Lonnie. That's a great idea. I like that. Any other questions or comments? Okay. All right. Lonnie also asks, do I have Instagram statistics? I don't have those here to share with you. The Instagram statistics are not as robust as the ones that we've seen from Facebook and from YouTube and some of the Google ones. So I don't pay as much attention to them, but that's something I'm happy to chat with you offline, Lonnie. If you want to look at those, I'd be interested to know if you're using some of the statistics from Instagram as well. Okay. Well, if there's no other questions, then I want to make sure to thank you all so very much for your time tonight. It's been great being with you again, and I have some closing words before we extinguish our chalice tonight. So we extinguish this chalice here that it might glow gently in our hearts. May it light your path as you leave this place. May it guide your way until we are together again. Thank you so much for your time, and it's been delightful being here with all of you.